nature is difficult for our minds to grasp. Obviously, it's difficult for our minds to grasp. How can you grasp something that has no dimension to it, but yet they claim it has infinite density and temperature? However, this may not accurately reflect reality. In other words, what he just said is, this doesn't really exist. Right? Researchers say, because the singularity idea is based on Einstein's theory of general relativity. Okay, now, why did they bring Einstein into this? Because next they're going to say that as soon as this singularity, or this point of infinite density and temperature, bangs, from that point on, it violates Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein's theory of relativity says that the speed of light is a constant. But they're going to say now, let's listen to what they say now, you'll see. The problem is, there's no reason whatsoever to believe general relativity in that regime, said Sean Carroll, a theoretical physicist at Caltech. Well, what does he say? He says the problem is the general theory of relativity of Einstein doesn't work in this Big Bang theory.
Just like in the quantum level, it doesn't work.
Well, maybe, yes, but...
In the quantum level, Einstein's theory of relativity doesn't work.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see what he mentions quantum mechanics now. It's going to be wrong because it doesn't take into account quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics is certainly going to be important once you get to that place in the history of the universe. So what place are you talking about? They're talking about after the bang takes place. So the very beginning of the universe remains pretty murky. That means they don't know what they're talking about. Murky is not even, it's more like a slang word, right? Scientists think they can pick the story up at about 10 to the minus 36 seconds dash 1/1,000,000,000 of a 1/1,000,000,000 of a 1/1,000,000,000 of a second after the Big Bang. In other words, what he said is that Einstein's theory may apply before the Big Bang, but as soon as the Big Bang takes place, which is 1/1,000,000,000 of a 1/1,000,000,000 of a 1/1,000,000,000 of a second, right after it takes place, then it doesn't apply anymore. Why? After the Big Bang, yeah, it says, at that point, they believe the universe underwent an extremely brief and dramatic period of inflation, meaning expansion, expanding faster than the speed of light. It doubled in size perhaps 100 times or more, all within the span of a few tiny fractions of a second. So, in other words, it expands quicker than the speed of light. So Einstein's theory of relativity goes down the drain. Anyway, this is the mumbo-jumbo of the Big Bang, right? So what does Prabhupada say here? He says that the other conclusion, of course, is that this cosmic manifestation is caused by an inexplicable, unmanifested void. This argument is meaningless. So a singularity of a point that has infinite density and temperature, which means nothing, right? And it explodes. How did it explode? Where did the temperature come from? And now it expands from being a point that has no measure to a huge mass, right? This universe is a huge mass of planets and oceans and everything, right? So now Prabhupada says the first conclusion is accepted by Vedanta philosophers, and the second is supported by the atheistic philosophical system of the Sankhya Smriti, which directly opposes the Vedantic philosophical conclusion. Material scientists cannot see any cognizant spiritual substance that might be the cause of creation. Well, obviously, they say it's a point that has infinite density. They didn't mention anything about God, right? So, now Prabhupada's going to make an amazing statement. Such atheistic Sankhya philosophers think that the symptoms of knowledge and living force visible in the innumerable living creatures are caused by the three qualities of the cosmic manifestation. Therefore, the Sankhites are against the conclusion of Vedanta regarding the original cause of creation. What does that mean? That means that the atheistic Sankhya philosophers, obviously there's two Sankhyas. One was explained by Kapila Muni to his mother Devahuti, and that's, Krishna consciousness. And then the second Sankhya, which is explained by the false Kapila Muni in modern times, and which is completely atheistic. Okay? So the modern scientists are following the atheistic Sankhya. Now, what does the atheistic Sankhya say? It says that the three modes of material nature are the cause of the living entities, and not that Krishna or God is the cause of the living entities. Okay, now he says, factually, the Supreme Absolute Spirit Soul is the cause of every kind of manifestation, and he is always complete both as the energy and as the energetic. So instead of a point, an immeasurable point that has infinite density and temperature, the origin of everything is a Supreme Person called Krishna, who has infinite energies. Now that makes sense. It makes more sense than a point that has no measurement, and so forth. And he's always complete. In other words, he can expand himself infinitely, but he's never diminished. That's the first invocation mantra of Ishopanishad. The cosmic manifestation is caused by the energy of the Supreme Absolute Person, in whom all energies are conserved. Well, now this makes sense. You have a person who possesses infinite energies, and he can expand them without being diminished. Philosophers who are subjectively engaged in the cosmic manifestation can appreciate only the wonderful energies of matter. Such philosophers accept the conception of God only as a product of material energy. According to their conclusions, the source energy is also the product of If your battery is dead, will the cell phone work? No. But here they're saying that your cell phone is also the cause of the energy. Does that make sense? No, the energy is coming from outside the cell phone. But here is the atheistic Sankhya philosophers, they say that the source of the energy is also a product of the energy. In other words, matter is the source of the energy of life, of living entities. Well, this is what the modern scientists say. Guys like Turing and modern physicists, they'll say that matter self-creates. Matter produces the energy that makes things work. Okay, so if the cell phone needs to get energy from outside to work, then you cannot say that the cell phone produces its own energy, right? So basically they're saying that matter produces its own energy without any outside intelligence involved. Well, anything that man produces is not, there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine. Obviously, everyone's trying to find one. But there's no such thing as a perpetual, in other words, a machine that creates more energy than it uses. Therefore, it's in perpetual motion, right? So, no, you always have to go from outside of to bring in energy. Just like when the electricity goes off, right? Because of a storm, right? So nothing works in the house. Everything is there, but there's no energy flowing into it to make it work. The house doesn't produce its own energy. Okay? So here, when it says, Prabhupada summarizes in the overview of the fallacy of all these material atheistic scientists, he says, according to their conclusions, the source of the energy is also a product of the energy. So the source of the energy is also the product. That means matter creates its own energy. Right? Such philosophers wrongly observe that the living creatures within the cosmic manifestation are caused by the material energy. And they think that the Supreme Absolute Conscious Being must similarly be a product of material energy. So this is basically what the Mayavadis say, that Krishna's body is also material. Right? Since materialistic philosophers and scientists are too much engaged with their imperfect senses, naturally they conclude that the living force is a product of a material combination. Well, that's what all the modern scientists believe. That if there's a soul, it's produced at some advanced stage of material combination, chemical combination, whatever. But the actual fact is just the opposite. Matter is a product of spirit. According to the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Spirit, the personality of Godhead, is the source of all energies. So now, we see, now Prabhupada says that Matak Parataram Nanya Kinchit Asti Dhananjaya Maya Sarvam Idam Procham Sutre Manikana. So 9th chapter, 10th verse, what does it say? Krishna says, maybe. This is 9th chapter, 10th verse says, Mayatatam idam sarvam jagat. No, it's Maya dakshena pakriti suyate sacharacharam hetananena konte jagat vibari bhartate. Yeah, he says, I'm sorry, 9th chapter, 10th verse is what I just quoted. This material energy, which is one of my energies, this material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So, scientists say matter creates life. Krishna says he creates life. So who are you going to believe? You say. So right away, there is a disconnect. Matter is a product of spirit. Spirit is not a product of matter. If it was, there would be no death. I mean, the doctors would be able to control the aging of the body. When one advances in research work, so in other words, basically when he says that the source of the energy is also a product of the energy. Matter is not the source of the soul. But they say matter is the source of the soul. Right? When one advances in research work by studying a limited substance within the limits of space and time, one is amazed by the various wonderful cosmic manifestations. And naturally one goes on hypothetically accepting the path of research work or the inductive method. So the inductive method is you make a lot of observations and you try and find a pattern, and if that pattern gives you predictability, then it becomes a scientific theory. In other words, if the predictability is like 50% or more, it becomes a scientific theory. Through the deductive method, way of understanding, however, one accepts the Supreme Absolute Person, the Personality Godhead, as the cause of all causes, who is full with diverse energies and who is neither impersonal nor void. Okay, so the deductive method, the bona fide deductive method, there's the unbona fide deductive method and the bona fide deductive method. The unbona fide deductive method begins with a guess. I think all white men are racist. Okay, so now, if all white men are racist, then I can pick any white man I want and question him, and he'll be a racist. So you randomly stop someone on the street and say, "Sir, are you a white man?" And he said, "Yes, I am." Okay, what do you think of black people? Well, I think they're people, just like me. Oh, you don't think they're like less human than you? No, why should they be less human than me? Oh, now that this blows up his theory. His theory was all white men are racists. And the first guy he talks to is not a racist. So, his theory, is blown out, So that's the phony deductive method. Real deductive method is you begin with the a priori truths of the Vedas. A priori means they're self-evident truth. So, therefore, if you want to, therefore, the Vedas say that here there's the efficient cause and the material cause. So, the efficient cause of a child is the father, and the material cause of the child is the mother. So you go around and start asking people, you can ask every mother, did you give birth without any contact with a man? And she'll say, well, yes and no. Oh, really? What's the no part? She said, well, I went to a sperm bank and I had a artificial insemination. So therefore it's yes. Okay, so everyone he asks, yeah, I have my husband. Most of the people say I have a husband. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 said I had artificial insemination, but still the origin of the seed came from a man. Right? So therefore that theory is true. That beginning with the a priori truth of the Vedas. Okay, so there's bona fide deductive method when you start with the truths of the Vedas, and then you try and see if you deduct from it, and if every step of deduction leads, when you compare it to reality, it's a fact. So therefore, it's true. Whereas the second way, the materialistic ways, they start with a hunch. They do a bunch of, let's say, well, they do the same thing. They see if they deduct from it, and if it comes up always true, then it's true. But if it comes up with a here Prabhupada says, through the deductive way of understanding, however, one accepts the Supreme Absolute Person, the personality of Godhead, as the cause of all causes, who is full with diverse energies and who is neither impersonal nor void. Well, we begin with the a priori truths of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and statements of pure devotees. Or, for example, Brahma, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha, Nadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam, he's the cause of all causes. Or Aham Sarva Sheprabhava Matak Sarvam Pravartate, everything material and spiritual comes from me, Krishna says. And Krishna is not impersonal, and he's not a void. The impersonal manifestation of the Supreme Person is another display of his energy. Therefore, the conclusion that matter is the original cause of creation is completely different from the real truth. Well, the real truth is presented by Krishna himself. Now, once he presents that truth, the materialists can try and disprove that he's God. But what is their explanation? Their explanation is everything starts from a singular point that has infinite density and temperature, and then there's an explosion, and then it expands, and then everything is created. That's complete nonsense. If that was true, you would be able to do an experiment and see the same thing happen. But obviously, it's not possible. So, therefore, we should go with Krishna's statements. Okay, therefore, the conclusion that matter is the original cause of creation is completely different from the real truth. This whole Big Bang theory is all about matter itself is the cause of creation. There's no intelligence behind it. There's no person behind it. The material manifestation is caused by the glance of the Supreme Personality Godhead, who is inconceivably potent. Material nature is electrified by the supreme authority, and the conditioned soul, within the limits of time and space, is trapped by awe of the material manifestation. In other words, the Supreme Personality Godhead is actually realized in the vision of a material philosopher and scientist through the manifestations of his material energy. Okay, let's read that again. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually realized in the vision of a material philosopher and scientist through the manifestations of his material energy. So, that means you see the sun come up. I mean, you're overwhelmed. I mean, this gigantic mass of matter is emanating an infinite amount of energy and lighting up the whole universe. It's a miracle that such a thing exists, you know. And then at night you see the moon. And again, it's a miracle. And it's also emitting light that's very soothing. So then you see mountains and rivers and oceans and spring and living entities, infinite living entities, microscopic. I mean, when they first discovered a microscope, it opened up a whole world that they didn't know existed. You look in the microscope and you see there's millions of living entities. They're so small you can't see them with the naked eye, but under the microscope you see them. It's like a miracle. There's a whole microscopic world going on, and in many ways our life depends on that microscopic world. So, in the same way, there's a macroscopic world, and it gets bigger and bigger. The extent of space is mind-boggling. Right? Space goes on for billions of miles, and in those billions of miles, there's infinite number of planets. You know, and we're just on one little tiny planet. So, in both ways, we're amazed, right, by the microscopic world and the macroscopic world. Material nature is electrified by the supreme authority, and the conditioned soul within the limits of time and space is trapped by awe of the material manifestation. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually realized in the vision of a material philosopher and scientist through the manifestations of his material energy. For one who does not understand the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his diverse energies, because of not knowing the relationship between the source of the energies and the energies themselves, there's always a chance of error, which is known as vivarta. So vivarta is a Sanskrit word, and basically it means that with limited senses, we make mistakes. So we might look at the sun and say, well, it's no bigger than my thumb, right? I can put my thumb in it. It looks like it's stretching from the bottom of the sun to the top, you know. So you can say it's no bigger than my thumb. But actually, it's not true, right? So our measuring with the raw eye will always lead to mistakes. As long as materialistic scientists and philosophers do not come to the right conclusion, certainly they will hover above the material field, bereft of proper understanding of the absolute truth. So as long as the scientists adhere to the false idea that material combination is the cause of life, they'll never understand the real nature of this world. They'll never really understand clearly what they're observing in this world, because they will see through the prism of that wrong idea. The great Vaishnava philosopher Srila Baladev Vidyabhusan has very nicely explained the materialistic conclusion in his Govinda Bhasya, a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. He writes as follows. So now we're going to hear a description by one of the greatest Vaishnava philosophers of modern times, Baladev Vidyabhusan. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, if we look in the first page of the Bhagavad Gita, what does Prabhupada say? He says, here, first page, it says, to Srila Baladeva Vidyabhusan, who presented so nicely the Gita Bhasya commentary on Vedanta philosophy. So it's right on the first page, before the book begins, right there. He's glorifying Baladev Vidyabhusan because he is one of the greatest Vaishnava philosophers of modern times. Okay, so now we're going to hear his explanation of the false Sankhya philosophy, which is the basis of modern materialistic science. The Sankhya philosopher Kapila, this is the false Kapila, not the real Kapila, has connected the different elementary truths according to his own opinion. Well, wait a minute, that's a red flag right there. So it's his own opinion. Well, but every human being is subject to 4 defects. We make mistakes, we're easily illusioned, our senses are imperfect, and we have a cheating propensity. So he's going to try and explain the truth of creation with his imperfect mind. It's not going to happen, right? So we're going to see it now. Material nature, now this is the explanation of the false Kapila. Material nature, according to him, consists of the equilibrium of the 3 material qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So equilibrium means they're not acting, basically. It's a static situation, right? So he says that material nature, according to him, consists of the equilibrium of the 3 material qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Material nature produces the material energy known as Mahatattva. So the material nature produces the material energy. In other words, it's self-producing. What is the Mahatattva? The Mahatattva is the manifest material nature, but it's manifest from the unmanifest material nature, which is called pradana. In the unmanifest material nature, the time factor and the modes of material nature are not acting. Therefore, there's no movement. Every atom comes to absolute stillness. But when the time factor and the modes of material nature act, interactions take place, and then you have production of things. And you see forms and bodies and so forth. But that only happens when a soul enters into material nature. When the soul is not in the material nature, nothing happens. And it goes into a sleeping stage called avyakta. Yeah. And just like you can have millions of products in Home Depot, but if a construction guy walks in, so he buys certain types of nails, certain types of electrical wire, certain types of cement, certain types of wood, certain types of electrical things, and he takes them and puts together a house. Well, did those things put themselves together? No. You needed an intelligent person to come who put it all together. So so nature cannot produce itself. It has to be some outside force that produces it, that makes things come together. But here he says, now this is the false Kapila's philosophy, material nature produces the material energy, known as Mahat, and Mahat produces the false ego. The ego produces the 5 objects of sense perception, which produce the 10 senses, 5 for acquiring knowledge and 5 for working. The mind and the 5 gross elements. Counting the Purusha, or the enjoyer, with these 24 elements, there are 25 different truths. Now, some of this is correct, and some of it is not correct, right? So, for example, there are actually 26 fundamental truths. There's the 5 Mahabhutas, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Then there are the 5 senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Then there are the 5 objects of the senses, seeing, tasting, feeling, hearing, touching. I mean, not hearing, smelling. Okay. And then there are the 5 working senses, the hands, the legs, the tongue, the genital, and the anus. And then there's the mind, intelligence, false ego. So now we're at 23. And number 24 is the Mahatattva, the aggregate material energy. Right. And then 25 is the Jiva soul, and 26 is Paramatma. Now we have a full panoply of elements that make up inert matter and living beings. You can analyze it like that. Okay. So, but he ends up, the false Kapila ends up with 25, not 26. So counting the Purusha, or the enjoyer, with these 24 elements, there are 25 different truths. The non-manifested stage of these 25 elementary truths is called Prakriti, or material nature. Actually, it's called Pradana, which is the unmanifest state of matter. But in order to avoid bringing in Krishna, he's going to say that the manifest state of matter is eternal. So you don't need anyone who can take it from unmanifest to manifest. See? And this is what the Buddhists do also. The Buddhists say that you don't need to talk about God because material nature is eternal. But they don't say that it goes through two phases, manifest and unmanifest.
Kapila, he uses
The false Kapila.
false Kapila. Does he use Vedas to explain his theory?
Oh, yeah, but he's giving his own spin to it. So right in the beginning, what did it say? It said that the Sankhya philosopher Kapila has connected the different elementary truths, right? That's Vedic truths, right? According to his own opinion, right? So that means that if you want to make minestrone soup, right? Well, there's a recipe for minestrone soup, but you say, well, I don't need to look at the recipe. I'll just make it my way. So my way or the highway. So you end up with dal makhani instead of minestrone soup, right? Because he does it his own way. It's the same thing here. He's dealing with the parts of the Vedic truth, but he's putting it together in his own way and basically messing it all up, making a joke out of it. All right. The qualities of material nature can associate in three different stages, namely, as the cause of happiness, the cause of distress, and the cause of illusion. So in other words, there's no God behind this. It's all matter. And to make the matter move, he's talking about the three modes of material nature. So how did the Big Bang start, right? The scientist's idea of creation. There's a point that has no measure. A singularity of a point that has no measure, but infinite mass, or infinite density and temperature. And then it explodes and expands faster than the speed of light. So in other words, Einstein's theory of relativity goes out the window now. And it continues, it's still expanding according to them, right? So where did the temperature come from? How can a point with no measurement have infinite density, right? These are all nonsensical ideas, right? And nowhere can you say that the source of the energy is the product of the energy. But that's what they're saying. The source of the energy is the product of the energy. So that's like the cell phone is charging itself. Does it start charging itself? No. You have to charge the cell phone. If the battery goes dead, you have to get a new battery or you have to charge it. So basically it's saying that matter self-creates. And there's no proof of that. Right? Everything that we see, this microphone, this the screen, this computer, the car, it has an intelligent person or persons behind it that put it together. It didn't self-create. And so, but in their explanation of the Big Bang or their explanation of anything, they're not saying that there is an intelligent person behind it. They're saying that it's self-created. So therefore, the source of the energy is the product of the energy. So there's no logic to it. Let's put it like that. Okay, so now he says, the qualities of material nature can associate in three different stages, namely happiness, the cause of happiness, the cause of distress, and the cause of illusion. The quality of goodness is the cause of happiness. The quality of passion is the cause of material distress. And the quality of ignorance is the cause of illusion. That sounds right, right? And then our material experience lies within the boundaries of these three manifestations of happiness, distress, and illusion. For example, a beautiful woman is certainly a cause of material happiness for one who possesses her as a wife. But the same beautiful woman is a cause of distress to a man whom she rejects, or who is the cause of her anger. And if she leaves a man, she becomes the cause of illusion. This is an example that Sankaracharya has given in his Sarirakbhasa. So he's saying that the nature has these three qualities: happiness, distress, and illusion. Now, is that true? No, it's not true. Human beings have these three, experience these three things. Not does the tree experience these three things? By the way, does the wall experience these three things? Does the carpet experience these things? This is again, it's a nonsensical concept. The microphone doesn't experience these three things, right? The television, the table doesn't experience these three things. You have to have a soul to experience happiness and distress, right? Yeah. An illusion is this book an illusion? No, the only people are an illusion. You know. So again, see, they're saying that everything is just matter, and that matter is experiencing these three things. Okay. Our material experience lies within the boundaries of these three manifestations of happiness, distress, and illusion. The two kinds of senses are the 10 external senses and the one internal sense, the mind. Okay, so 10 external senses, that is, you have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, you have seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. Okay, and then you have the mind. Thus, there are 11 senses. According to Kapila, the false Kapila, material nature is eternal and all-powerful. There you go. See. So, is the electric wire all-powerful? No. No, it has to be electrified. Something has to push the current through the electric wire. It, by itself, it is not electrified. You can touch an electric wire that's not connected to anything. It doesn't do anything. It's only when it's connected that it does something. But see, they're saying that nature is eternal, so, because they don't say there's manifest and unmanifest nature. They're just saying nature is eternal. So that means you don't need God. You don't have to even talk about God because it's eternal. And that it is all-powerful. Well, wait a minute. How can it be all-powerful? Like, for example, when you die, when a person dies, then the body is made of matter. Well, what made the matter animate and conscious? And why is it inanimate and unconscious now? That means there's something else that was in the body that made it animate and conscious. And now it's not there, and you can't bring it back. So there's something missing. See? But they get around all that by just saying, nature is eternal and it is all-powerful. So by those two statements, you obviate any mention of God. Originally, there is no spirit, and matter has no cause. Matter itself is the chief cause of everything, and it is all-pervading. And it is the all-pervading cause of all causes. So you see, now they've completely gotten rid of the concept of God. You see, the Sankhya philosophy regards the false Sankhya philosophy regards the total energy, Mahatattva, the false ego, and the 5 objects of sense perception as the 7 diverse manifestations of material nature, which has 2 features, known as the material cause and the efficient cause. So basically, the material cause and the efficient cause are the same. The material nature is the cause of everything, right? But
How would they explain intelligence?
let's see. Okay, so they didn't. They mentioned the 5 objects of the senses, the false ego, and the total material energy. So it regards the Mahatattva, the false ego, and the 5 objects of sense perception as the 7 diverse manifestations of material nature, which has 2 features known as material cause and efficient cause. So material nature is the material cause and the efficient cause. And it has 7 diverse manifestations. 1 as the total material energy, 2 as the false ego, and then the 5 objects of the senses: seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. The Purusha, the enjoyer, is without transformation, whereas material nature is always subject to transformation. So the Purusha is the person, the enjoyer. You are the enjoyer of your body, right? So this again is a contradiction of Krishna. Krishna in the 13th chapter says, Chitra chapimam vidi sarvasya bharata. Chitra yor. Let's see what it says. 13th chapter, 3rd verse. Chitra yor jnanam yajtat jnanam matam mama. O Skayana Bharata, Arjuna, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find 3 different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. Well, according to this false Kapila, there's only 2. There's the Purusha and matter. There's no Lord involved.
And the Purusha also is the product of the material world.
Yes. Well, wait a minute. We haven't read that yet. We haven't read that yet. Well, no. In the 25, he mentions the Purusha. 24 elements plus Purusha. But he didn't say what is the origin of Purusha. Well, no, he said, wait a minute, he did say, no, he said, originally there is no spirit, and matter has no cause. Matter itself is the chief cause of everything. In other words, matter is God, basically. Saying. It is the all-pervading cause of all causes. The Sankhya philosophy regards total energy, Mahatattva, the false ego, and the 5 objects of sense perception as the 7 diverse manifestations of material nature, which has 2 features known as the material cause and the efficient cause. See now, if a person is not careful, they're hearing this and oh, this must be our philosophy. This is not. This is Mayavad philosophy. It has nothing to do with Krishna consciousness, right? And that's why it's a little hard to understand. How can matter be the cause of matter? Right? How can the book be the cause of the book? Was the book the cause of the book? Was the car the cause of the car? Was the Empire State Building the cause of the Empire State Building? You see, that's basically what he's saying. So he's saying that originally there was no Purusha, there was no spirit, and matter has no cause. Matter itself is the chief cause of everything. It is the all-pervading cause of all causes. Well, wait a minute. Again, now, this is a contradiction. Brahma says that Krishna is the cause of all causes. He didn't say that dumb matter is the cause of all causes. See, this is why when I first had my introduction to Indian philosophy, I thought it was a bunch of nonsense. Because I once in Paris, I went to the Indian embassy once, and they had a free library. So I went into the library and spent a whole day there, and there were all these different books, Sankhya, Nyaya, Karma Mimamsa, and each book was like thick like this, and I picked them up one by one, and I was thumbing through them, and I got confused. Each one was talking about the dravyas, the material elements, and one was talking about, there's 24, another one's saying 25, and there's another, and each one is explaining them in a different way. And I said, I just closed all the books. I'm never coming back here again. And I'm not going to go to India because it's a bunch of hodgepodge. Well, yeah, because unfortunately, every one of the darshans, or 6 schools of Vedic philosophy, you have you have 6 different darshans. Okay, you have Gautama Muni's Nyaya, and you have Karma Mimamsa, and you have Vaisheshika, and then you have Sankhya, and you have Yoga, Vasista, and then you have Vedanta, right? Now, each one of those philosophies has a modern counterpart that is a false representation of it. Just like you have the real Kapila and the false Kapila, right? For Sankhya. Each one of them has a false counterpart in modern times. That's why it's confusing, right? Each one explains the dravyas, the material elements, differently. When you read it, you can't really figure out what's going on. Now, some people think they understand it, right? And they'll give lectures on it, but they explain it all in the impersonalist way. Well, in the impersonalist way, it's like this. It says here that material nature is one, but because of the interaction of 3 qualities, it can produce the total energy and the wonderful cosmic manifestation. Well, you show me how matter produces itself and makes everything by itself. And it's a preposterous theory. It doesn't make sense. You have no experience of that in this world. You don't see the wall making another wall. You don't see the carpet making another carpet. You don't see the microphone making another microphone. See? Such transformations divide material nature into 2 features, namely the efficient and the material cause. Well, nature can't be the efficient and the material cause at the same time. The Purusha, the enjoyer, is inactive and without material qualities. although at the same time he is the master, existing separately in each and every body as the emblem of knowledge. This is a bunch of mumbo-jumbo nonsense. It sounds good.
It comes from matter,
Huh?
then it is not of material nature.
It comes up?
Purusha comes from matter, but it is not of material nature.
Yes. Yeah. By understanding the material cause, one can guess that the Purusha, the enjoyer, being without activity, is aloof from all kinds of enjoyment or superintendence. So, in other words, the Purusha is inactive and is not involved really with the material nature. Then how can it be the enjoyer? That if you're an enjoyer, you're involved. Right? Although he's aloof from all kinds of enjoyment or superintendence. Sankhya philosophy, after describing the nature of Prakriti, material nature, and Purusha, the enjoyer, asserts that the creation is only a product of their unification or proximity to one another. With such unification, the living symptoms are visible in material nature, but one can guess that in the person of the enjoyer, the Purusha, there are powers of control and enjoyment. When the Purusha is illusioned, for one of sufficient knowledge, he feels himself to be the enjoyer, and when he is in full knowledge, he is liberated. In the Sankhya philosophy, the Purusha is described to be always indifferent to the activities of Prakriti. Anyway, this is the explanation by Baladev Vidyabhushan of the materialistic point of view. And he's correct. Because if we look at this explanation of the Big Bang, everything he said is in here. So he says, when they say, so in the very beginning of the universe remains pretty murky. That means they don't understand what really happened in the beginning of the universe. Scientists think they can pick the story up at about 10 to the minus 36 seconds. That is 10 with 36 zeros. That is one trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. So they're saying 1 trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. They know what's happening from that point on. But before that, they're not sure. Then they say, at that point, they believe the universe underwent an extremely brief and dramatic period of inflation. In other words, expanding faster than the speed of light. It doubled in size perhaps 100 times or more, all within the span of a few tiny fractions of a second. Inflation may seem to violate the theory of special relativity, but that's not the case, scientists say. Special relativity holds that no information or matter can be carried between 2 points in space faster than the speed of light. But inflation was an expansion of space itself. So they're trying to get around violating Einstein's theory of relativity by saying that there was no let's say, light traveling from one point to another. It was space itself that was being created by the expansion. Inflation was the bang of the Big Bang. Before inflation, there was just a little bit of stuff, quite possibly. Expanding just a little bit. We needed something like the inflation to make the universe big. So this little point of infinite density explodes and goes faster than the speed of light, doubling every trillionth of a second, and creates this whole, and it's still expanding, and creates this whole universe with planets and eventually people and this and that. And it is, as it says here, it started from virtually nothing, and now it's this huge thing. And it all happens without any intelligence behind it. It happens by itself, automatically. This rapidly expanding universe was pretty much empty of matter, but it harbored huge amounts of dark energy. The theory goes. You can say the myth goes on. Dark energy is the mysterious force that scientists think is driving the universe's current accelerating expansion. During inflation, during the expansion, dark energy made the universe smooth out and accelerate, but it didn't stick around for long. It was just temporary dark energy. It converted into ordinary matter and radiation through a process called reheating. The universe went from being cold during inflation to being hot again when the all-dark energy went away. Scientists don't know what might have spurred the inflation. That remains one of the key questions in Big Bang cosmology. In other words, the whole thing is nonsense. They don't know. That they're describing it as if they know. And they're talking about some mysterious thing called dark energy that eventually disappears, and all of a sudden appears, light, energy, mountains, rivers, planets, and so forth. Okay, so basically, Baladev Vidyabhusan summarized the foundations of this nonsense, materialistic point of view, that doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, so now we're going to pick up from where we left off yesterday. Jai Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Okay. Anyway, maybe we'll end here and pick it up tomorrow. This was sort of a summary of what we discussed yesterday, with a little more detail. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, Chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. Adi Lila 6, 14 and 15. It's a very long purport, and basically why is all this information in the chapter about Advaita Acharya? Because he's Mahavishnu. He is the origin of the material creation. So we're hearing speculations about the material creation, and therefore when we hear about Mahavishnu, then all those speculations just disappear. And then you get the actual facts, how this creation started and how it's continuing. The scientists, they say, in one sense they say, so the very beginning of the universe remains pretty murky. It means they don't understand. Then again it says, scientists don't know what might have spurred or what caused this expansion. Right? They think there was an explosion, right? And then this point of infinite density, a point that is not measurable, has no measure, but has infinite density and temperature, exploded and expanded. And they don't know what caused that dynamic expansion, where it doubled every 30 millionth of a second. I mean, what are you what's 30 millionth of a second? The people are talking nonsense. So all through this article is all about, well, after giving a long explanation that sounds a little scientific, but we're really not sure about any of this. It's silly, just silly stuff. Haribol. Yeah. What? Yeah. What? An action and inaction. You want to know what that means? Okay. That means that when Arjuna refused to fight, it was sinful. Sinful. And when he agreed to fight, it was not sinful. So, one who sees action in inaction. So, by refusing to fight, he committed a sin. And inaction in action, when he agreed to fight according to Krishna's instruction, there was no sin involved. Yes. That's what that whole section is about. You understand? So when Arjuna refused to fight, there was action and inaction. And because of that action, he gets a reaction. But there was inaction and action because he fought according to Krishna's instructions. So there was no karmic reaction to that. You see, like for example, if someone says, Prabhu, huh? So someone says to you, Prabhuji, can you wash the dishes tonight? And you say, no. So there's action and inaction there. You're refusing to do service. And you say, no. And if you say, why? Say, well, I'm going to go see a movie tonight about, happiness in Thailand. So, which is nonsense, right? It's a nonsense movie. Girls walking around in bikinis and things like that. So, therefore, there's action and you're inaction. You refuse to do the service, but you're going to get a reaction, and the reaction is going to the movie and watching nonsense. See? So, it sounds like, double talk, action and inaction and inaction and action. But actually it's talking about karma and akarma. Haribol. You know how many years it took me to figure that out? I'm not kidding you. I didn't understand that verse for at least 35, 40 years. I didn't have anyone to explain it to me. I mean, the Prabhupada's purport was there. I read the purport over and over again. Still, it didn't stick in my mind.
Same here, bro. I read that purport like 2 to 3 times today, but it's okay, no problem. In the evening, I'll ask you.
No, I mean, you can read it, and I mean, you understand all the words, but it doesn't really connect in your mind. Until you actually, when you read about it in other places, like lectures that Prabhupada gives, it strikes you more than when you read the actual, Bhagavad Gita. That's because we're not ready to understand it. That's put it like that. Because, we're like Arjuna. We would probably, if we didn't have Prabhupada's purport, we would probably side with Arjuna and think there's something wrong with Krishna. Why is he telling him to fight, to kill, when he doesn't? When he's giving so many good reasons why he shouldn't. But see, Krishna is looking at the motive. Everything depends on the motive. His motive was he didn't see how he would personally be happy, either fighting or not fighting. Yes, and due to attachment, material attachment to his family. But, we're all materially attached, so obviously we wouldn't be able to figure out Arjuna's dilemma. we would side with Arjuna before he surrendered. Saying, Krishna, there's something wrong with Krishna. There's nothing wrong with Arjuna. If we have the same disease, then we can't diagnose it. Haribol. That's why this hearing is so important. Regular hearing.
Prabhu, today and tomorrow, I'm reading, only in US itself, people are going to spend $3.3 billion on flowers. Just these 2 days, 13th February and 14th February.
Valentine's Day.
Huh?
Valentine's Day.
$3.3 billion. Just US.
Yeah.
The prices are double. I went to Costco to buy flowers. They're double the price. The price is same, they have reduced the roses. So.
Well, because there's huge demand. Yeah. Scarcity increases the prices. It's capitalism.
If we see one movie or one serial, we easily remember the story almost for the entire life. And half of the time we even remember the half of the dialogues. When we read one page of Bhagavad Gita or we sit in a lecture, we come out. By the time we cross this thing also, hardly 5% is also not there. If both of them are creating impressions, why that impression of movie